What's going on with the Mississippi and floodwaters?
Well, the key statistic you can look at right now as far as the farm situation in the Midwest in general is the progress of the corn crop, which is related to what's going on in the Mississippi. The USDA said on Monday that 4% of the corn crop is in so far this year. Normally it's 16%, so you're going at a quarter of the rate. Last year it was a record 26%, so you have this huge contrast. The reason for that is the water situation. Whereas last year you were looking at the beginnings of what turned into the 2012 drought, this year you've had a lot of moisture. So you're in a situation where the Mississippi, which 4 months ago folks were worried about it running dry, now the problem is it's overflowing its banks.
Well, Alan, what are the communities doing in order to prevent the floods from happening? Is this something that they just plan for every year, or is there something anomalous now?
Well, it depends on the community and the extremity of it. When you get to the lower parts down on the Mississippi River, you're seeing communities, they've seen this before, but it's not at the level of, say, in 1993 when you had some major destruction in those regions. So they're looking at preparations and they're being a little bit more cautious. Now, up in Fargo, North Dakota, along the Red River, where I'm going to be next week, you're looking at some severe flooding situations, which they got downgraded a little bit today, but there's still some concerns that possibly record flooding in that part of the country. You've had this late season snowfall in places like the Dakotas and Minnesota. You have ground that's still frozen, so when it thaws, that water just runs on down and it overflows the banks.
Alan, you referenced that previously there was not enough water in the Mississippi to support barge traffic. In fact, there were stories, of course, about the waterways being clogged with barges and ships. That's changed. Are we seeing any capsized vessels?
Well, the parts where the ships are being slowed down hasn't changed a bit. The only thing that's changed is a 180-degree flip in the reason. You're not seeing any real danger to the ships themselves, but what you're seeing is just delays because these water levels have been so volatile, and you really are starting to talk about situations that people really haven't seen before, where you've seen these sort of extremes in the last few years, but it seems to be a new normal.
Well, when you talk about extremes, does that also bring up the topic of climate change?
Well, inevitably it brings up the topic of climate change. When you take a look at the volatility in the water levels, the rainfall, the temperatures the last few years, up in Minnesota, you referenced my hometown, they're talking about possibly canceling baseball season up there this spring because the teams can't even get out to the playing field. I mean, this disrupts lives, this disrupts people's spring plans, and yet it's becoming more and more the world is going. In agriculture, that means mitigation and adaptation strategies, which farmers are really starting to look at seriously, and lawmakers in Washington are looking at as a new farm bill comes to debate this fall.
Alan, you said that only about 4% of the corn crop is in, while we expected about 16% this time of the year. What's that going to do to corn prices?
Well, at this point, it's pretty early to tell. I mean, last year when you had the corn crop coming in so soon, people were talking about a bumper harvest, and then we had the drought. What happens is as things get later and later, farmers have to plant shorter season varieties, and you start seeing a little bit of a hit on the yield. A bigger concern right now is with the wheat crop. The wheat crop that is harvested in May and June in places like Kansas, that got planted last fall. Right now, it's in a very sensitive stage for the plants, and if they don't get the right moisture and temperature, you can see some serious damage to the wheat crop.
So what are we talking about? $7 a bushel for wheat and just under 7, or maybe $6.18, $6.20 for corn?
Well, you've certainly been looking at, those sorts of reactions in the market. Corn prices right now, some of the supply situation is working itself out. You're seeing more corn going into ethanol. Prices stabilized a bit today. Wheat prices, supply situation has also been challenging.